Hello and welcome to Uncarcerated, the podcast. This is our second video episode ever, and I got to give you guys a quick update. I'm Justin, by the way, but here's a quick update. Tajuddin Ashaheed, my fantastic, beautiful co-host, is recovering from eye surgery. He had a retina reattached. I think that's what they did anyway, just a couple days ago. And so that brings us to a very special guest. We have here with us one of my best friends on the staff. We have Chris Fowler. What was your title again, Chris?
Therapist, social worker.
There you go. All right. Well, I'm really glad to have you here, man. What do you think of this dig?
It kind of looks like Hassan's office, actually.
How dare you? This is not Hassan's office.
It's a simulacra, I'm sure.
This is a fully fledged recording studio set up by Second Chance Center to produce this podcast.
Oops.
So you've been with us for a little while.
Yeah.
Why don't you let people know who you are? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here.
18 months. I've been on staff. I guess my position's a little confusing.
Sure.
To explain.
Yeah.
So my position is I essentially work between Aurora Mental Health and the Second Chance Center. It was a grant-written position.
Yeah.
Written 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Room for 2 therapists, so we're probably going to be moving forward with a second therapist as well.
Okay.
I'm originally from, as many people believe, Alaska. This is false information. I'm from the UK.
Right.
I moved to the US about 14 years ago.
Cool.
Worked as a teacher. Worked in trade unions back in England before eventually becoming a social worker.
Okay. And so you've been doing social work for how long now?
About 8 years.
Cool. Where did that start for you professionally? Like where?
Yeah, I knew I wasn't going to tell this story, but I'm going to tell this story. I did not want to work in mental health.
Okay.
Because I kind of thought I'd be entering it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. To fix your own problems? Is that?
No, actually, to fix the ghost of Christmas past.
Okay.
There's a bit of mental health and substance abuse in my family.
Okay.
And I didn't want to fix my family.
Sure.
So actually, what I wanted to do was be a lobbyist. A social worker fixed in the legislature.
Yeah.
But after working on a mental health bill, which everybody sort of ran away from, I realized this is not a population I can work with.
Okay.
So I graduated without a plan.
Yeah.
But I was pretty engaged in this mental health bill, and I went right to the very basics. I went right into the trenches and worked in Sterling for about 2 years.
Now, Sterling is home to one of Colorado's prisons, right?
Yeah.
And not much else. There's a subway, because every one of these towns has a subway. And they have a prison.
Yeah, and a Pizza Hut.
Hold on. That's fancy.
Yeah.
I remember when the town I grew up in got a Pizza Hut installed, and that was, I mean, we couldn't afford to eat there, but like we could dream.
Yeah. Well, my hometown of Coventry not long got their Pizza Hut.
Cool.
We had a McDonald's before we had a Pizza Hut.
Huh.
Drive-in. That was posh.
It implies you have a car, which is,
That's funny. That's funny because me and my friends, none of us had a car. Cars are really expensive
through it.
in England to run and drive, whatever,
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you get to Sterling, you decide you want to work with the people.
Yeah.
And you're working at the prison?
Well, I was asked by my agency, what's the population you want to work with?
Yeah.
And knowing the way mental health sort of works, or having a rough idea of how mental health works, I almost want to say it doesn't work in favor of the male population, but essentially what I said was I want to work for the male population, because I know that there's a crisis in modern masculinity. I believed at the time there was a crisis in modern masculinity.
Okay.
And they laughed, rubbed their hands in glee, and said, "Okay, we've got just the population." And they sent me to Sterling.
A bunch of dudes.
Sterling Jail. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I would often do services in Sterling Jail.
Okay. So what was it? What you were looking for?
I don't think I really knew what I was looking for about 7 or 8 years ago, but I did eventually find what I was looking for. So I liked my transition. It feels very organic. I never intentionally went out to work in the criminal justice system.
Okay.
But I've learned organically to sort of understand it and embrace it, and makes me a bit of an outsider. And I think that works to my favor. I work in various courts.
Okay.
I've recently started working in the wellness court as part of the Aurora municipal courts.
What's the wellness court do?
That's a fascinating court, actually. If you've got an individual who's got a case in Aurora,
Yeah.
who's had several contacts with the emergency services, they will beep or come onto the radar of the municipal court social worker, who will then go out and do an assessment.
Okay.
Once the assessment is done, the social worker will present the client as a potential candidate for the wellness court.
Okay.
And the wellness court's got public defender, prosecutor, judge, 2 behavioral health representatives, and obviously the social worker, and they get to vote whether this is a good enough candidate or not. And they can be placed in a sober home or a home.
This sounds like shockingly progressive, right? Because I mean, in my mind, like you hear, repeat offender, frequent flyer. That just means they're sending bigger guns. In my mind.
Yeah, actually, that's how I thought this was. I entered these courts.
Literal guns, by the way. This is not a metaphor.
As a Brit, they won't let me pack, I'm afraid.
There we go.
Yeah.
As a multiple convicted felon, I'm not allowed to carry a gun either. So we're in the same boat there.
Yeah. We carry different
That's right.
weapons.
My weapon is my pen.
I use foul language.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So they're sending. I mean, how does something like this arise, right? Like, because it's, Taj and I have talked in the past about how like we think that social workers should replace most police officers, in terms of like, why are we sending the guy with the military training to help somebody solve a problem that is outside the scope of like military, right? Why not send somebody who can talk somebody down or have a conversation with the person on a human level? This sounds like sort of like that.
I mean, with any exception of someone coming out guns blazing. I mean,
Right.
I have very little experience pulling triggers, so
Sure. I mean, but that's the exception, right? Like most police calls, most police involvement are just not those sorts of moments. They're not the blockbuster Hollywood moments. They are. I am in distress.
I got to be careful in how I respond to that. I certainly think the two parties could learn from one another.
Okay.
I know that historically the municipal police have been really reticent to signing up to anything mental health.
Right.
And some officers do a great job. Others are still sort of, reticent. I don't know. I think that's a very complicated question. I would love to answer from the heart.
Yeah.
But I also have to answer.
I understand.
From a political perspective.
I'll just run a little banner underneath the screen that translates for you.
I mean, knowing some social workers, they'd probably be the last people I'd want on a crisis scene anyway.
That's fair. I mean, they're good and bad in all professions. Yeah.
Right.
The difference is, of course, that when the guy at McDonald's does a poor job with his job, you get pickles, and when the police officer does a poor job with his job, you die. Well, I mean, actually, you and I don't, but the people of color do.
I think one of the reasons why I came to social work as opposed to counselling was our code of ethic is pretty broad and comprehensive.
Okay.
And coming from a trade union background, one of the pieces I liked was that we can get involved in labour disputes.
Okay.
The other piece, which is more speaking to the police side, is the advocacy piece.
Okay.
Because whether we have police or not, and they come into a courtroom context, this is why I enjoy courtroom work, whether it's in drug court, family court, or this wellness court. Is it's really important for me to advocate for sometimes clients who don't have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you've got systems that are sort of reining in on the client, who's going to kind of speak for the little fella?
No, I mean, I think that speaks to something that Second Chance Center tries to do in general.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, together we can accomplish things that individually we just cannot, for a variety of reasons. Whether it's, these overwhelming systems that are just too complicated for a single person to navigate, or these systems that are sort of triggering in ways for people because they've received unjust service from them their entire lives.
Yeah.
So you're at Sterling. I'm going to back up a little bit before I continue down my...
So 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, you're out at Sterling. You're enjoying your time at the Pizza Hut.
Not really.
No.
There's nothing to do except bowl in Sterling.
I have to tell you that it's absolutely shocking that bowling is the primary form of recreation in that town.
I've learned to be. I got lessons in the 2 years I was there. I played a bunch of people recently, and I kicked proverbial butt.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're at Sterling. You end up here. I met you a couple years ago, right?
Yep.
About this time 2 years ago.
Yep.
Second Chance Center had. Well, not to get too deep into the history of Second Chance Center, but for a long time, we've been very successful at providing certain sorts of services and providing peer mentoring. You know, people who've been there who can say, I've just been out a little bit longer, are helping you find a job, keep a job, navigate your personal relationships, and provide somebody to talk to about everything from the Broncos to shooting dope, depending on where you're at that day. But just like through a filter that like you get, speaking a language you understand. I mean, it's sort of the magic here. But there's some things that are just outside the scope of like that approach, right? And one of those things is mental illness, right? Like we're not actually I kind of am, but like some of us are not clinically trained in how to handle any of these situations. So we recognized it, and we're like, well, let's find some full-time like clinicians. Yeah. And you were the guy we chose to bring on board.
Yeah.
What did it feel like walking into Second Chance Center the first time?
Oh, I had landed.
Yeah? This was home.
Yeah, I still feel like that now, actually.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. I actually say to a lot of my clients, because a lot of my clients are like, so you're going to stick around for 3 months before going on to and I sort of very quick to say, actually, I have no plans of going anywhere. I love my job. Yeah. And that's not a spin. Prior, I'd worked for a lot of agencies, and they can be pretty bulky, pretty bureaucratic. Yeah. And being based here, there was a sort of, I call it, I get told off for this, but I'm still going to use the term. There's a sort of feral attitude to my colleagues that I work with. There's a very, almost like English mentality, a North English mentality, where they'll speak as they find. There's nothing sort of faux or fake in the colleagues I work with. So that means I can speak my mind and not have to sort of censor myself as I felt I had done a little bit in agencies. If I want to get passionate about something, I can. Yeah. And that's why I feel like I've landed still. And it's difficult, though. I kind of relate my job to being the stepchild. Okay. Because I work for Aurora Mental Health, and I work for Second Chance Center. I've got a biological parent, and then I've got this new surrogate parent.
Okay, this really cool stepdad.
Or wants to be cool.
Wants to be cool.
Yeah. And, both are saying different things. Both are sort of like chastising me for two different things. So you got to toe two party lines.
That makes sense.
And that's why it's difficult, but I love it.
So let's talk about the actual work with the participants then.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know. I mean, maybe you want to talk about trends you've seen, or like what the biggest kind of things that like you find yourself like occupied with working with our people here.
I see an awful lot. Well, again, I'm still working with a lot of men. Right. And there's a lot of mistrust or distrust with regards to therapists. I think there's a mental health services in the Department of Corrections that has failed. I'll be quite frank. This is the second time today I've been frank about it. It fails, and it has failed our clients from misdiagnosis, which leads to wrong medications, to therapists whispering in the guards' ears. Right.
Because it's really hard to have that the intimate relationship necessary for like counseling to work if if that person is serving two masters, right?
It's still a way. I mean, that's one of the arguments I presented today is if you've got probation or parole-led mental health services, who's working for who? The therapist is working for who? The probation, parole, or the client? Yeah. And sometimes I find clients either won't tell me
Yeah.
information because they feel that that's then going to get passed on to parole probation.
Yeah.
I have to explain the limits and the context of confidentiality. But
Sure.
I also say, look, I'm not your parish priest either. I'm not the confessional, but
Right.
I work for the client.
And the vast majority of participants through Second Chance Center you see are not, like, you're not reporting back to parole for those people, right?
No, unless it's like, it depends. I mean, if it's a substance violation, to be honest, parole probation are going to see that in the UA anyway.
Right.
And sometimes you have to go to parole probation to kind of stick the client to the services. Or if a client is engaging in services, when perhaps it might be in their best interest. That's where the power of parole and probation can work.
Sort of
from a mental health perspective.
leveraging it for some sort of accountability.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we need to reiterate that's only a really subdivision of what I actually do here. Mostly,
Right.
I am here as a mental health tool for the client, not parole probation.
No, yeah, and that's sort of what I was getting at too.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about like the day to day then, like when the pandemic's not on, when we're open. You know, what let's say I walk in, it's my first time here. Like, what's our interaction going to look like?
That's a good question. It starts with like an hour questionnaire from me. I'm going to do what is known as a biopsychosocial medical assessment.
Okay.
I want to know your background. You know, have you ever had therapy or mental health services in the past? If so, with who, for how long? What was the diagnosis?
Okay.
Is there a substance use component? Is the client using services? Biggest one is the client safe?
Yeah.
You know, are they feeling suicidal? Are they feeling homicidal? Are they hearing voices?
Right.
Is there a medical component? Is the client in chronic pain, for instance?
That makes sense.
Where are they going to live?
Yeah.
When they leave my office, are they homeless? Do they have a place to live? Have they met their milestones? You know, did they graduate at school, high school, college, whatever? You know, it's where you've got to be really, you got to poke around and ask a lot of questions. But at the same time, you're sort of creating this rapport. Because you're asking 101 questions.
Yeah. No, that
asking for trust, which is, you know.
Well, yeah, I want to get deeper into that part actually, because you're talking about building rapport, about trust, and then one of the first things we talked about was that mistrust of mental health services because of I don't know. No, I'm running out of euphemisms. Mental health services in prison are frequently fucking terrible.
Yep. As I hear.
Yeah, my experience.
As I've seen.
A nightmare. And what is it that works about the approach that we take here, that you take, that kind of eases down those barriers that are, you know, pretty logical extensions of self-defense, you know, right?
Well, I can only speak. I mean, it's like what I said to you earlier, that I have this organic approach. I didn't go to college to do criminal forensics or anything like that. I just have a genuine interest in
You give a shit.
How can you not?
Well, I mean, I feel that way. I think a lot of people don't give a shit. I think the system is designed actually to sort of make it pretty explicitly clear, like when somebody's referred to by a number instead of a name, that at some level of the decision-making process, somebody doesn't give a shit.
You know, there's a couple of lessons I've learned in this profession that have really helped me. The biggest one is learning to leave judgment at the door or at the foot of your bed, so that when you meet someone, and I actually teach this on a Saturday, which is sort of, and it's a little bit linked to Buddhism, funny enough. But one of the big pieces is when you leave judgment away, negative or positive thoughts, and you just view a person as this empty canvas, and you become interested. Yeah. You know, tell me about yourself. You know, I have a sex offense charge again, or I whatever the charge is. Yeah. You know, it's
rather than placing these like rather than that letting define a person, letting the story define the story.
Yeah, you tell me your story.
Yeah.
Because this piece of paper, your referral, is this very sort of like black and white story, but why don't let's rip this up.
Right.
You tell me. You tell me about this. And yes, if there's pieces missing later down the line, I'll be like, as part of that trust piece, do you want to tell me anything else that I'm seeing here?
What what informed this approach? Where do you get the because like I said, I think it is actually rarer than like we would like it to be that you let people define themselves, that sort of thing. Like how did you come to that?
Oh my God. I don't know. Age.
Yeah.
I'm coming into my 50s soon.
Yeah.
Previous background.
Sure.
I've lived a life before I was a social worker.
Right.
And sometimes I'll share that with my clients.
Yeah.
If there's a death or a substance piece or an immigration piece, then I'm going to sort of share that and say, not that this is my hour, but
right.
I can in some way relate to that. I guess it's relatability and being curious about someone.
I can definitely appreciate that. We're about to take our intermission, so you can grab your popcorn, your soda, and stuff. I know that you and I were talking before the show about a couple of things, a couple of books that you feel are just like excellent.
Oh yeah.
So why don't you drop those recommendations down? We'll flash that shit on the screen here in just a couple minutes.
Right now?
Let's do it.
Okay, there's a book that I cannot recommend enough. I recommend it to colleagues, clients, prospective social workers, even my own family.
Yeah.
The book's called Chasing the Scream by a British journalist and TED Talk presenter called Johann Hari.
Absolutely.
He's a great guy. Chasing the Scream, really, for me, it's well written. It's written from so many perspectives on the failed war on drugs policy that's been pervading the US for the last 20, 30 years. And as I say, it takes everybody's perspective, from the dealer to the immigration guard to families of persons in incarceration. It really covers the whole gamut of the US system, class and social, all of that.
We'll dive more into that topic actually as soon as we come back, and we'll see you in just a second. Welcome back to Uncarcerated, the podcast. I'm Justin. I'm joined by Chris Fowler. Before the break, we were talking about, we said we were going to get into drug laws and mental health as it relates to substance use. I'm wondering how often you see that and how big a role it plays in what you do here and who you talk to, and just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, that's why that Chasing the Scream is such an important book, because I think it educates people on substance use and mental health. One of the interesting things I always sort of advocate is substance use is kind of like treating a mental pain. So if you break a limb or you hurt yourself physically, you check into the ER.
Somebody's checking in right now.
Right now, I know. It's a great cue. And you get a medication to treat that pain. 9 out of 10 people who use substances on a regular basis are really kind of submerging a mental illness or a mental pain, I should say.
Yeah.
So, what's the old movies you used to see? If you had a bad day or you had a car accident, take a shot of brandy.
Right.
It'll help you,
Get through.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, not everybody who's addicted to substances is doing it for the sheer love of substances. That's only very less than 10%.
Yeah. So you're seeing a lot of this like psychic pain then when you're talking to the people who come through your door.
Yeah. If you've got PTSD, traumatic experience, you're reliving those experiences. You can get triggered without even realizing what a trigger is. And just to sort of help you get by, whether it's your drug of choice is weed, meth, alcohol, heroin, whatever, it kind of dulls that
makes sense.
Existing
that
pain.
Makes sense. You mentioned PTSD, and I want to pick your brain about this just a little bit because Taj and I say all the time when we're on here that incarceration itself is a trauma, right?
Yep.
Like being in prison is way outside of the scope of what like we're designed to handle.
Yep.
It seems to me, and as a care manager here at Second Chance Center, it seems to me that that's the thing that presents most like glaringly when I'm talking to people.
Yep.
Has that been your experience too? Then
Absolutely. If you look at the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, which is kind of the holy grail that therapists use and bill from,
right, for diagnosis and stuff.
for diagnostics
Yeah.
specifically, right? Some of the symptomology behind PTSD
Yeah.
is this sort of paranoia, this anxiety for a sustained period of 3 or more months
Right.
onwards. So if you've been incarcerated for 3, 6 months to a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever,
Right.
you're living 24/7 a heightened state of anxiety.
That makes sense.
Not to mention trauma. I mean, given the complexity of violence that can exist in prisons,
Right.
whether it's gang related or not, or sex offender status, there's a violence and a hypermasculinity that's not experienced outside of prisons. So if you're living at 24/7, that does a lot to the neurochemistry of the brain.
It's like living in a war zone.
It's exactly living in a war zone. That's what it's related to, because PTSD used to be linked specifically
Right.
with military personnel.
Shell shock.
Right.
Right.
Because who else is going to live 24/7 in this heightened state of
Right.
anxiety and trauma? Well, they forgot that prisons and jails have a propensity of this hyper alertness.
I know, I never got in a fight in prison. I got kind of close a couple times. Nobody ever raped me or anything like this. I never got high in prison. I never owed anybody any money. But I still left prison. Fucked up. Like, I remember the first time I went to a grocery store after I got out, walking around the corner of an aisle, and all of a sudden, like, I felt like I was, like, I couldn't breathe, and, I couldn't, like, I was dizzy, like, I thought I was going to die. I had to leave the grocery store and just kind of, like, sit outside and, like, breathe deeply over and over and over again to get my shit together. Mm-hmm. And almost everybody I've talked to who's done time has like, the exact same story about Walmart or about a King Soopers, or that's a local grocery store, something like that, And when I started, going to school for mental health stuff, and I was like, oh my God, I get it now,
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm explaining this to, like, well, not explaining, that's sort of like insulting sounding, but when I'm having this conversation with new people coming out, I see this light go on, and they're like, oh my God, dude, I thought I just couldn't hack it out here. I went to the gas station to buy a pack of cigarettes after doing 20 years, which is a whole other great discussion to have, because I did the same thing. And then, like, I thought the world was melting and I was going to die. Just being around people coming around corners and stuff like that.
How long did that last for?
For me, about a month. The very first night I got out, I couldn't figure out how to use the television place I was staying. And I cried and I lay down, I slept on the floor because, like, I actually had the thought, I cannot do this. I was like, maybe the world's just not for me.
So, do you remember that question that you asked me earlier in the show? What are some of the symptoms that I see that walk in my office?
Yeah.
That's what you're describing is a tip of the iceberg, and what a lot of my clients come in explaining to me. Isolation. One of the big common threads that most of my clients have is, I don't like big spaces. I don't like open spaces. I don't like big crowds. And if you think about the way prisons and jails are set up, I mean, you've got this militaristic guard that owns your body. You don't own your body when you go to prison and jail. And that's also the same in England. Her Majesty's pleasure. Your body is owned by the state. And you're told where to move, when to move, how to move. Look at the prison cells themselves. It's a little confined space that you get used to. You don't get used to it, but you do when it's compared to coming out. So a lot of clients that come into my office is isolation. there's anxiety, there's this paranoia, there's this sense of always looking over one shoulder.
Absolutely.
Transactions. That's, you and I have talked a lot about running computer and phone-based groups, because I have clients who are missing appointments because suddenly, they've been in incarceration for 10, 15, 25 years.
Right.
And smartphones are now this thing.
Brand new.
How the hell do you use one of these things if you haven't been part of that evolutionary cycle?
That makes sense.
So there's an anxiety about, well, I'm missing my appointments. And that's, and the fact that when you're out of incarceration, parole probation still owns your body. Pee in that cup, be at my office. And there's an anxiety that comes with that too.
I mean, you're describing like almost everybody I talk to here, like when the smartphone thing in particular, and just generally using the internet, not understanding that language, that way of thinking makes you feel like an alien. I've seen this 100 times. And this part of the struggle of reintegrating into society is already feeling like you belong. So like when the world has changed to such a degree as it has in the last like 15 years technologically, and you're fresh out, like not to mention the trauma you just experienced in prison, like coming out to a different planet is, it's shell shock.
A lot of my clients will say, I can't handle being on the outside. It's so much effed up as it is being on the inside. I know how it works. I know how the politics of prison and jail work. And it what is it? The big fish in the little tank compared to the little fish in the ocean. And there's an anxiety that comes with that too.
You mentioned, you asked me how long that lasted when I was talking about the grocery store thing. The grocery store thing lasted about a month, but I'm still to this day not as comfortable in crowds as I was before I went to prison.
It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And this is where good therapy, and I mean good therapy, and depending on the severity of the trauma, if a client has experienced extreme trauma, there's a wonderful intervention called the EMDR, which resets the neurological pathways. Unfortunately, it's not as widely available as we'd like it to be, but just down to like a temporal mood stabilizer, really coupled with regular therapy to sort of talk about these experiences, normalize these experiences. Because a lot of the guys I meet are what they call institutionalized. And, we're used to talking a certain way, that even if I open up to a therapist, how do I know that therapist is not going to talk to the man?
Right. I mean, you sort of adapt this like whole like new culture when you're in prison that helps you survive there, but is unfortunately super maladaptive on the outside.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
The things that helped now hurt. Right. The behaviors. Right. Like you cannot act like that out here. You will find yourself back in prison.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, we've been running a men's group here at Second Chance Center on Saturday mornings where we sit and talk about these things, and like guys will come fresh out and they'll be like, I was at the bus stop and this guy, stepped in the back of my shoe and I kind of tripped a little bit and I turned around and all I wanted to do was just smack the shit out of him. And he's like, but I can't do that anymore.
Smack or be smacked.
Right. I mean,
get there first before that guy jumps on me.
And it's built on all these different like complex assumptions about people's motivations and behavior, right? Like he just assumes that the guy did it and it had to be intentional, because in prison you wouldn't do that accidentally,
right? Because
you'd be more aware of your surroundings.
Right.
And then when like even the realization that it has nothing to do with you is sort of like hard to grasp as well, not because of like, you're an egomaniac or something, but because like it makes you realize how small you are. You were talking about that small, fish in a big pond thing. That's equally hard to deal with. In prison, a lot of people are someone. Even if you're known for being a fucking idiot, at least you have a reputation. Out here, no one knows who you are. Everyone's glued to their phones.
Right. And what do you come back to? Services are limited. Housing is really limited. I have a lot of clients who are trying so hard to go clean, sobriety, but they're only, because they have felonies, the only housing options are right smack in the middle of community strips where dealing is a way of life.
The same places they used to use in.
Right.
Right. I mean,
No wonder recidivism's so high, you know.
of course. I mean, you put somebody back in the exact same situation, oftentimes worse.
But go clean.
Yeah, right. Like here you are. Like, it's like sending the guy back to war, but like now I'm gonna need you not to shoot anybody.
It's setting. I feel that post-incarceration sets everybody up to fail. Parole, probation, modern day society. If you're a sex offender,
Man, they have it worse than anybody.
the limitations of resources are so great with the sex offender, and this is the hardest sell. I don't see why, but if you break it down, it can be well explained. But there is an absolute gross limitation on services. When you're applying for jobs online, but you cannot access a computer,
Right.
again,
The entire world's
limitations.
online now.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that people go back to using.
The war on drugs.
Yeah.
Such a failure.
Right. This is just like kicking these people in the nuts when they're already down.
Yep.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about like how you've seen that impact people you've worked with?
I see a lot of clients who were incarcerated for substance use, maybe gang related or specifically substance use, and really just had the book thrown at them where they have a felony. I think really it's the felony piece we really want to talk about, because that is the sword of Damocles over the heads of anybody who's got it.
The Scarlet Letter.
The Scarlet Letter. Right. You're branded.
Yeah.
Access to housing, very limited. But again, setting up to fail.
Even like publicly funded housing, or like the stuff that the government sets up to help people who need it, but not you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to earn less than minimum wage, of course, supplementing your wage would come through selling drugs. From the age of 12 to 18, I was selling drugs and I was good at it. Well, of course, there's a temptation to go back to doing that. We have a whole bunch, not just the war of drugs, but we've got a whole load of failed policies. Minimum wage in Colorado really has to exceed $15 an hour. I think, to be honest, it should be about $18, $18 an hour, and not gradually, immediately. We've got the money.
I totally agree. I mean, you look at what it costs for like the worst apartment I could find somebody here, and it's over $1,000 a month.
Correct.
And I'm not a mathematician or even particularly smart, but I know that when you make $12 a fucking hour, you cannot afford to live in the worst apartment here.
Yep.
Like, that's it.
Yep. Colorado's one of the most expensive states to live in. The cost of living has really gone up.
Absolutely.
Wages haven't.
Right.
And you've got the middle class complaining about it. Can you imagine coming out of incarceration, trying to start from the very beginnings?
Yeah.
Just to even get minimum wage.
We see it every day here. I mean, I remember getting out and going to Good Times, the burger joint. This is not a plug. And applying for a job that I could have done, and being told no, you got this violent felony. I'm like, are you kidding? I got an associate's degree while I was in prison, but I can't flip your fucking burgers. And that was a job that would have paid me $12 an hour or something like that, and they wouldn't hire me. The first job I ended up getting out of prison, I was walking up and down the streets, and there was a sign that said, "This way, welders needed," like handwritten. And so I walked down this, half-mile long path to a guy's farm who gave me a job. That was it. He never asked, but he probably wouldn't have hired me either if he knew my record,
What's really interesting about this is when you get out of prison or jail, you're sort of set up with the governmental insurance, Medicaid.
Yeah.
So this is another problem that I see in mental health is a lot of our clients come out of incarceration and they got Medicaid. And they're actually told you've got this for 2 years.
Right.
And that's a lie.
Okay.
Because the minute you start earning more than $1,300, Medicaid drops off.
Right.
Now, we want our clients to be successful. Our clients want to be successful. So as soon as they earn minimum wage, that's going to be, if you're earning 40, 50, 60 hours at minimum wage, that's going to exceed $1,300 a month. And that means your Medicaid drops. And you and I both know about this. We've been kind of fighting pretty hard that if a client doesn't have insurance, or has a private insurance, that's then going to change their whole mental health treatment.
Absolutely. It makes most of it just unaffordable.
Yeah. I mean, who on minimum wage earning 40, 50, 60 hours a month can actually afford anything off the private market?
Yeah, absolutely no one.
I mean, that's a week's worth of food, 2 weeks worth of food. That's $300, $400 a month out of the paycheck.
Now, we've been fortunate here to be able to say, we don't care.
It doesn't matter.
You're still getting services, mental health, vocational, all that shit, regardless. But that is not the case for most people getting out around the country.
Yeah, that is true.
Most people are shit out of luck.
Yeah.
Like, treatment ends when you start doing a little bit better financially. Like, that, it's just like, where's the encouragement to continue doing better? Like, we're taking away this thing that probably helped you get there. It's absolutely ridiculous. What sort of like solutions do you see? I mean, we talked about raising the minimum wage.
I think it starts with, I really honestly think it starts with moving the minimum wage to at least 18. I think we've got to be really progressive about that. And given the nature of moving that, which is every, 5, 6, 7 years, we should really push it out to what should minimum wage look like in 2030. Or all right, let's be realistic, 2025.
Yeah.
And let's set that right now. So in 5 years' time, we were ahead of the curve.
Instead of playing catch up all the time.
Correct.
Yeah.
We have the money. We've got a lot of tax revenue that comes from the weed sales, the marijuana.
Right.
The schools, all right, I don't want to take too much from the schools, but there's plenty. I think there needs to be a cap on housing, like what they did in New York several years
rent
ago.
control.
Correct.
Yeah.
And there was a bill actually last year that belly flopped, actually. I'm really surprised. Where, similar to the New York, you can't raise the rent beyond maybe 1%. Because, I mean, this happened to me earlier this year. I went from, 1,100 to 1,300. That's a 20% rise.
Right.
And my wages weren't rising with that.
Sorry about that.
No. Well, I'm supposedly middle class. Can you imagine what the working class with a felony?
Right.
Exactly.
I literally can.
I couldn't moan about it because I was like, well, if it hurts me, it's already been hurting other people.
Yeah. I got to dive into something real quick that I want to talk about. I received a letter, a huge package of mail from a law office in Kansas, which is where I served my time, Lansing Correctional Facility, announcing that my wages were going to be garnished for unpaid court costs from 10 years ago. I owed them $780. Apparently, so I got them on the phone. Apparently, they've been looking for me for years, and they finally found me. And look, I was unaware I owed $785 in court fines. But here's the thing. I have a job and I was able to just pay them. I paid them $785 over the phone, and now I don't have to worry about it anymore. But you know how, like, that call would have fucking destroyed some of our participants' lives.
What's the point?
Right. There's so many asinine parts of this equation. Like, surely retaining a law firm to track me down and spending years to do it costs more than $785.
Well, I'm thinking of ombudsman. There's this thing we have in Europe called the ombudsman. So banks have ombudsmen, telecommunication have an ombudsman. There's ombudsmen are these little independent bodies that we need them in hospitals. Because hospitals bill different to other hospitals for the same procedure.
Right.
I'd like to see these court costs have I'd like to see the courts have an ombudsman to sort of say, what exactly are you billing for? Let's have a breakdown of that service. Because most of my clients just will say, I've got a figure. And I'm like, but what's that for? And they're like, it's just a figure I have to pay off. And there's no knowledge as to what exactly administrative costs they're paying. And it's, again, a yoke around the neck because it's now affecting voting rights in Florida.
Oh, yeah. What's going on in Florida with that is ridiculous.
Right.
It broke my heart for the people who get those letters to their employers then they can't make rent, right? I mean, I'm in a position fortunate enough that I was able to take care of all my business, but that wasn't true of me when I first got out. If I had gotten that letter, it would have screwed up everything in my life.
Oh, on top of what is it? Child
support's the other one that
as
just
well.
absolutely rakes people. Yeah.
Yep.
And God, what's going on in Florida is insane. This, if I'm not mistaken, this video will come out like the day before the election.
Good God.
Yeah.
Do we have do we have any predictions for? And do we think any of our candidates are changing?
I don't know. You know, it's not endorsing any political candidates, but
Anybody but Trump.
yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen, man. I thought I knew what was gonna happen 4 years ago, and I was wrong.
I'm a Brit, so I can say this.
Yeah.
We need to change the constitution and rewrite Obama to get back in.
There we go.
Yeah,
I'd
you
support
can edit
that.
that whenever you like.
Yeah, there should be a big blur over your face as you
A lot of beep,
just
beep,
shit
beep.
on our country here. No, you're right. I mean, and this sort of goes back to, like, you know, modifying the Constitution. We do need like huge institutional changes in order to make all of the services that people need when they get out more available.
For 10 years, I paid tax into this country, federal and state,
Yeah.
and I couldn't vote. But that whole thing about taxation without representation, I'm now a citizen specifically, so I can vote.
And that's the story of a lot of our participants. I mean, you're fortunate in Colorado to be able to vote on parole. That is not the case in a lot of places. Shit, man. Look, we're out of time today.
Wow.
But this has been great. It's
Yeah.
been awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on such short notice. Next week, we'll be back with Taj, and we'll be doing our usual thing. And that episode will air after the election, but will be recorded before it happens. So we're just going to guess and then act like that happened. And we'll see how that goes.
And let's hope Taj makes a speedy recovery, too.
Absolutely. Hearts
Taj.
are out to him. Don't forget to check out Johan Hari. He's fantastic. I'm Justin, and this is Chris, and we're coming to you from Second Chance Center. It's the Uncarcerated Podcast. See you guys later.